Entrepreneur MBA podcast purpose is to help existing business owners grow their companies past the 10 million in revenue per year benchmark. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and I'm co-founder of Financing Solutions. For those of you who don't know us, Financing Solutions provides easy-to-set-up lines of credit for small businesses, and I will be your host for today's Entrepreneur MBA podcast. If you are interested in learning more about a business line of credit for your business, over my 30 years, I've always had a line of credit, almost always. Please visit our website at fscreditline.com. That's FS as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com. Over the last 25 years, I've built six companies in the $5 million to $25 million range, including two companies that have made the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies in the United States. I love learning from people with business experience, and today I'm very excited to be speaking with Chris Joyce from Gusher. Chris Joyce is the founder of 24 companies in high-tech consumer goods, health, and manufacturing. His products have been sold in more than 11,000 stores in 23 countries. He has users of his tech products in 148 countries around the globe. Chris, welcome to today's Entrepreneur MBA podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
You know, very rarely do I ever have a guest who is as much, and I'm not trying to pump myself up, as much serial entrepreneurship experience as I do. And so, 24 companies that you've had.
Sure.
It's exciting for me to speak to you. I think I'll be really curious to hear what you're going to talk about today.
Well, the first thing I notice is your background with that. It's six and going and everything else and what you're doing. There's going to be a lot of commonality. There's going to be a lot of overlap. And really, there's going to be perhaps some stuff that's kind of hard to understand for people who haven't done a good amount of companies, the patterns that we see, which is fundamentally different.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, can you really teach somebody, like today's topic's going to be the landmines once you pass the business startup phase,
Sure.
Right? Can you really teach somebody something that's going to happen to them in advance? I think the good thing is that they're aware of it. Right. But, business experience, like anything in life. I mean, you have a little snow on the roof. I have snow on my roof. People really underestimate the value of experience.
Absolutely. I think experience is the most valuable thing. And as to whether or not you can transfer that experience, in the very beginning stages, when I was starting companies in my 20s and early 30s, I didn't think it could be standardized. It was something that, how do you cover every possibility? But once you reach, I think, a certain level of company starts and types, there are certain definite patterns that aren't apparent when you're first starting a company. And they do repeat themselves across industry, across verticals, across company size, over and over and over. I don't know if you can see it, but I get goosebumps because it happens so often, almost like clockwork.
Yeah, and I've said this in other podcasts too, and I'm sure you've seen the same way. I mean, you've done more business, some more startups than I have, but the sixth company I built we got it up to speed in 3 months. What would have taken us 3 years.
Sure.
Right. You just knew, okay, I have to have accounting software. I have to have CRM software. Okay. How are we going to generate leads? All right.
How's the branding? How's the voice? How's this?
Oh yeah. What is the purpose of our company? What are we bringing to the market that is unique in the marketplace? You just go through that so fast because you're like, okay, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. And, honestly, I'll tell you is the chances of probability of success for your organization to me is just so much higher,
I view it like weight training or like exercise or any sport that you do. Literally in the beginning of anything, you suck. I mean, you're horrible at it. You don't know what's going to come at you from left field. You don't know the time frames and the cycles that should be taken to get something done. You learn that stuff. And as you progress in those things, you get better and better and better. With business, we don't have really, belt types and we don't have a novice, intermediate, and advanced and categories of it, you just proceed and you get better and better. And some people stop with one and they do these things one time and then they're done and it's over and they just grow and have it. And others of us, we're born to do something different. We're born to really create companies and do things differently. And for us, it's really, I think, patterns, experience that enables us to then do them a hell of a lot more rapidly.
Yeah,
and a lot better too.
Yeah, let me be clear too. There's two things I haven't done yet. I have, and I'm not going to do this first one. I never took angel funding money. Okay,
Yep.
and during my day, that really wasn't a big way to generate money.
It didn't exist in the early days.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
Okay. And now every entrepreneur thinks that's the way they start the business, right?
I think it's ass backwards, but anyway.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the idea. So
Sure.
I think it depends on the idea.
Sure.
The second thing is I really haven't sold a company yet for a significant amount of money. I have one right now that will be a sellable business, and I'll be pretty excited. I can kind of check that off my checklist. But my business has always been very good cash flow businesses and quality. I wouldn't say quality of life businesses at $25 million isn't exactly a quality of life business, but it depends on the industry always. But so what about you? Have you raised? So you haven't raised money through angel funding, or you had?
I have. So we've done it through formal angel funding because nowadays it's very much like venture capital used to be. We did it also through really friends and family and stuff like that. But what we've always concentrated on almost from the beginning, I've done, is what I call the vested interest market, meaning that the people that have the most to gain from the success or failure of the company typically make up the best investors for the stuff that I do. So like, let me give you an example. When I started a low carb food company, which ended up becoming the largest in the world, I started that and I had nothing. I mean, literally $1,200 and started that company, started growing. Well, one of my investors ended up being the person that manufactured the food machines. That company isn't a formal angel investor. It's not friends and family. They were the people that really had the most to gain. Another investor ended up being the packaging company. And so that company that manufactured the cartons and came out to our place basically had a full-time person there as we were growing. These are companies that become embedded in what you do. And those are many times the really best investors because, again, they have the most to gain from the success or failure, and they fundamentally get what you're doing.
Yeah, so you and I have just jumped into the advanced entrepreneurship phase. So,
Sure.
Most of our listeners they're going to be smaller businesses. They're the purpose of this is to help them over 10 million. Yep. And again, the reason why I picked 10 million, just so our listeners know, I've said this in the past podcast, but is because I found that smaller businesses at 10 million is when other companies are starting to be interested in you. They're interested in purchasing you. You have scale because the owner's now not just doing everything, so that's, so when we get into our discussion right now about the landmines, once you pass the business startup phase,
sure.
Let's gear it toward, companies in the millions of dollars. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the landmines that you've experienced.
Well, one of the most, and this is a regularly occurring thing. It doesn't happen daily. It doesn't happen monthly. It doesn't even happen necessarily yearly. But I always come across it with different companies that are different stages, usually about once every 5 to 10 years. And it's really the partner abandonment issue, meaning that there's fundamentally somebody else that this founder is tied to in some way. They may be a minority partner. They may be an equal partner because they structured their deal or their company incorrectly, but there's somebody there that basically abandons the business for whatever reason. It can be they're older, it can be they sick, it can be they've lost interest, it can be they get depressed or injured, whatever it may be, but they fundamentally abandon the business. And so that scenario right there tends to get pretty ugly depending upon how it happens. And so you would like to go ahead and have, the relationships all nice, smooth and dandy and everything else, but we call those the landmine partners. And so just like a regular physical landmine, imagine that you're this founder, you're out in the middle 100 miles in really the wilderness away from everybody. You're walking down this path and sure enough, you hear a click. You're stepping on a landmine. All right, this partner didn't come in as a landmine partner, didn't go ahead and expose himself as a landmine partner, but here you now have two decisions. All right. If you stay there in the middle of nowhere, basically, chances are you're going to die because there's nobody there. And if you pull your damn leg off that landmine, chances are, well, you're going to be blown up, and who the hell knows if you're going to go ahead and come back from that. And that's something that we see all the time. And so navigating those scenarios becomes extremely difficult, insanely difficult.
Are you a fan of the idea of having a partner or not having a partner?
I believe in minority partners. I believe that when you go ahead and create a company, that you're fundamentally building on an incorrect foundation if you're doing anything that's equal, because almost always, from my experience, there is one partner that will do the vast majority of the work and the pulling of the sled up the mountain in the beginning stages. And one person that typically has a better vision, or not a better vision, but is more married to a vision, more intense to it. It's like their child. The others are almost in a way along for the ride. And so, in answer to your question, not equal partners.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the first 4 companies I built, I did not have a partner. I didn't want a partner.
Right?
I heard so much horror stories. And then I started Financing Solutions and another company I have called Elite Funeral Funding with another guy who
Sure.
it's been an incredible relationship. Like I am so lucky that I found him. I know he feels lucky that he found me. And we have very successful companies, and he's my best friend. So but I still like going in. So when we started Elite Funeral Funding, we have 2 partners that are 40% owners
Yep.
combined, and we own 60% of the company. And I still am. Listen, I'm not going to start another company. That's it for
Sure.
me. But I'm still very reluctant to bring on a business partner. And what I did with the business partner I have now is, I would say we knew each other before, but we did a trial so much partnership. I would say we for 2.5 years we looked at angel funding deals together,
Right.
and we started seeing how well we got along. So a trial. But listen, anyone who's listening today, they're ready. Their company's already started.
Yeah.
They already have a partner,
Exactly.
right? And it's just, to me, it's just like a marriage. I had a very successful marriage too. My wife passed
But
away.
you said the key phrase right there. I mean, it's a marriage. It's not
It's a
a
marriage.
partnership.
Right.
And just like you did probably with your marriage, you didn't meet that person first day and suddenly the next day you were married. You literally took it in stages. You tried to see if it was a fit. You got to know the person. You probably knew why they were doing what they were doing. You knew their background. You knew how they acted in certain scenarios.
Yeah.
You had that. And that's when you get married. That's when you actually do a partnership, but never 50-50. All right.
Yeah, and I did that with my second company. I forgot that I did a trial partnership where
Yeah.
we worked together. They had their companies, I had mine. I worked in their offices, and I thank God I did that, because it would have been a nightmare.
Absolutely.
And so you're right. I forgot. You kind of do that trial partnership thing. Well, listen, but my point being is, if you're already involved in a partnership, you have to work on that partnership just like you have to work on your marriage. It just, you have to go out for a beer. You have to have, you have to kind of spend time together. If there's a real problem, you got to discuss it. So that's really, really important. So that's one of the landmines we talked about. If you have a partner, or if you're thinking about getting a partner, you better do a trial run. Make sure everything. Try to be the majority owner. Those type of things. What's
Absolutely.
another landmine that you would say?
And comes down to a little bit of a landmine partner, but what the heck do you do when a partner just instantly, you wake up one day and they've skipped town, but they've emptied all your bank accounts because they were a signer on those accounts and everything else. I've actually run into that, and at this time, it was affecting 3 different entities, and that's a very big fire to go ahead and go through. And it's something that can really screw you up big time if you didn't build the right foundation. And so, a lot of these problems can always be solved by knowing the right foundation to build, but you don't know that at the time you built the foundation.
Yeah, you
So,
got to. I think you got to plan, right?
yeah,
You got to plan. And I'll give you the scenario. I'm going to try to make this short, but I was really worried for a long time about my business partner dying for any reason, because he knows stuff about the company that I don't. And so I was like, man, if he goes, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
Right. And I told him, right. And he's, and so I'm not going to get into all the details. So, the crazy part about all this is, what ended up happening is actually pretty recent, is my wife passes away. And I'm a planner.
sure.
So luckily, I kind of had things organized around the house so that if I go,
Right.
she would be okay. Right.
Sure.
Never thinking that if she goes, what would happen.
Right.
And so luckily we had done some of that work. So I knew where all the passwords were. I knew what all the documents were. We covered all the different things. So I'm telling you, it was a big help. So I would say my advice, Chris, is if you have a partner, you got to go over, okay, what happens if this guy becomes incapacitated? What happens
Right.
if we get in a fight? What happens if, a variety of different things? What
But
else?
also that sets it up for the employees too, because the same processes that you're doing with those partners, you can also be hurt by the employees. So you have to think about that, the downside risk, how to protect it, how to standardize it, how to put those protocols in place so you're not screwed. I mean, we see all the time where SaaS oriented companies, fintech, prop tech, anything that's requiring software, that you end up having a minority shareholder end up going ahead and bricking the system to get what they want. And here's a person that has 5% of the company, 3% of the company, 10% of the company, suddenly acting almost in a way like they own 100% of the company and forcing the hand. Those are dangerous scenarios. So, what we always do is we always have backup. We always have scenarios that we have access to. Yes, we may be down. Yes, we may be hurt, but at most we're down for a certain amount of time and then we're back up. So nobody can hold us hostage. Those are just good scenarios. You have to think of, how can I be held hostage? What's my Achilles heel? And then try to eliminate those scenarios, especially as you start approaching 10 million, because you are now entering a different zone. You're becoming a middle market company. The stuff that worked for you to get to 10 million is not going to work for you to get from 10 to 50 or $100 million. That is just to get to the $10 million level. That shit isn't going to work after.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm lucky enough to know a lot of business owners, right?
Sure.
And the thing I've noticed with business owners is, as they progressed, their companies got bigger, they got more and more organized.
Sure.
They got their processes and procedures down. They had scenarios covered. They weren't held hostage by any one person. They built a good team. There wasn't so that like one guy that I know really well. He built a really good company, and he was anal about making sure HR policies were in place, about procedures were in place and documented, that people were following those procedures. And you know what? And he sold his company for a lot of money, because it was, someone came in and said, wow, this is, and I think
he's got his shit together.
He's got his
got it
shit together, right?
standardized where somebody it becomes, the company is the business, not
him, right?
Right.
And you hear that all the time. And I think there's so much value in you saying to yourself, as you're building your company, what would somebody from the outside look at my company, and are we doing well in that area?
Right.
It could, because if it's about you, let me tell you something. Your multiple for what they're going to pay for your company is going to, now, the other benefit of it is it makes you a better company to generate better revenue and net profit too.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think
Right.
there's a side, that's the real value. Right?
But also many times the founder that started the company and got it to 10 million isn't necessarily the person that thinks the way that needs to be thought to get it to that next stage. So they absolutely have to be involved in that. I mean, there's no way to do it without the founder. But having them sit there and create standard operating procedures for, let's say, the sales process, having standard operating procedures for, let's say, the way the lab works, having all these different things in place, they should oversee it. They should have their DNA in it, yes, but they're not necessarily the ones that create it. Many times we direct the companies that to bring in somebody that literally that's all they I do. And there are people out there that literally standardize processes. And so they help take what you do in your day to day and they just basically quantify it and they give it order and it helps. And so many people that's a way to leapfrog that.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things I noticed too is small businesses like $1 million or $2 million. I've seen a lot of the business owners be control freaks,
Sure.
and at 10 million, you can't do that. Like, now listen, there's always the aberration, right? Steve Jobs was the aberration of a control freak,
And he
right?
got control taken away.
That's right. But he was, it's also a billion-dollar company. It's just,
Sure.
a lot of times the lessons that you learn from big companies, I've always felt they just don't apply at a $10 million level. You could take some things out of it maybe, but in general, from my experience, somebody who's small says, "Oh, I have to do it all myself because I don't trust anybody to do it." And that's a sure sign that you are just not going to make it past a certain amount.
Exactly. That's death. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I look back in how I created companies and how I create them now. And yes, I always started off as a lone wolf or a very small team where I was always mass majority stockholder. But what I do now is I put teams of people in place from the very beginning that have the experience, the depth of knowledge, etc., and I let them run with the ball. And that is the way to do it. I'm there to go ahead and provide the resources, to provide the sales validation, to go ahead and do, let's say, the capital side of things. But I'm not there to go ahead and cross the T's, dot the I's, and figure every last iota out because I'm not going to tell these people how to do their jobs. They're experts at what they do. And what it enables you to do is to leapfrog generational development and grow your company a hell of a lot quicker. I mean, it just does.
Yeah, so let's talk about, you said capital development, stuff like that. And
Sure.
I think that's one of the other areas that I obviously saw when I was building my companies. And that is, so you have to learn the entrepreneurship stuff, which is, the X's and O's, right?
Yep.
You got to learn that stuff in all the, accounting systems,
The
CRM systems.
entrepreneur's education. You got to
you got to have all that stuff,
Basics.
right? But the next thing that you have to get educated as you're going up is the world of finance, right?
100%.
Okay,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I'm not just saying that because I own a business that provides business lines of
Yeah,
credit.
yeah.
I'm saying that, which I really believe in, by the way. But you got to know, how am I going to fund this? How am I going to handle my accounts receivable? It could be factoring. It could be
Sure.
because if you haven't dealt with the bank yet, wait till you go and you see what they look at versus what you think they look at.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're speaking a completely different language and you have to learn their language.
Absolutely. So, the shortcut to that is, and it's what I do, I find expert CFOs and I bring them in. That's what they do.
I know it.
And they're able to talk the vernacular. They put it in the right form, everything else, and they get it done at that stage. But the one thing is that when it comes down to companies at that size, is the question is, all right, I'm going to go a little bit off tangent here, or where I want to take it because there's a reason. When start approaching $10 million, the question is, what do you need the money for? Are you doing certain things for expansion, standard things? But if you're doing a land grab, meaning that you're trying to do a bigger grab for territory, you're trying to dominate a market, you're trying to disrupt, then the things or the knowledge that you need to have in order to do that from a financial perspective are fundamentally different than even just the X's and the O's of finance. That becomes a whole different territory.
Yes.
So, and typically a company right at 10 million, they need those funds to go ahead and fuel that fire, to go ahead and do that land grab. And so I say land grab when you're trying to take over an industry, when you're trying to capture a huge market share. That's a fundamentally even different way of doing things, that almost in a way that you don't just need to have a CFO, you need to have a rainmaker CFO in a very specific vertical, because that's even a whole nother language.
Yeah. And I think there's everybody should know the options that you have are factoring, not for what you're talking about, but factoring, lines of credit with commercial banks, lines of credit with alternative lenders, cash advances, dangerous, but these are all smaller stuff for smaller companies.
Exactly.
You have business loans, home equity lines of credit, refinancing your mortgages. You have angel funding, friends and family. Then you get into venture capitalists,
Yep.
and
Family
then
offices.
what?
Family offices,
Yeah, family office. That's
institutional
right,
funds,
right.
IPO or something along
Oh,
those lines,
that's
or
completely.
crowdfund, right? But you can do all these. You can have self-financing through your customer base, all these other things that can rapidly expand you.
Yeah, and you can go into partnership with another
Yep.
company, and so it's another landscape that you have to learn. Listen, the number one biggest mistake I see entrepreneurs make nowadays is they jump right into angel funding, right?
Yep.
And
Sure.
I just think it's a mistake.
I Well, let's stick on that right real quickly. So, I don't know when you started your business, but you and I are approximately the same age, all right?
Yeah,
Plus or minus a couple of years, it doesn't
yeah,
matter.
32 years ago
There
I
you go.
started.
So I'm like 30. So we're good. All right. So real quickly, back when I was starting companies, we were always taught fundamentally, and I started out on Wall Street very early, that good deal first, money second. Meaning that the company had to be generating revenue. The company should be self-sustaining, even on a small scale, before you bring on funds. You don't use funds to prove out an idea. You don't use funds on a black hole research. You don't use funds for the magical product market fit, which is ass backwards. You should have product market fit from the very beginning, or you shouldn't be creating the damn company. And so many people these days are taught that, okay, go out there, get angel financing, try to get a seed round from VC, incubator accelerator funds on a small scale and prove it out. Bullshit. You don't need money at all in the very, very beginning stages to prove out an idea.
That's
We've done
right.
it multiple different ways, everything
Yep.
else. I know your market doesn't necessarily there, who your customer base, but in terms of dealing with products and ideas and companies, you shouldn't need it at that very beginning stage.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that people listen. You're a bigger business. You're a bigger entrepreneur. You've done bigger things than I have. Okay, I never. I always wanted to hit singles. I didn't
Sure.
want to hit home runs. It wasn't my thing. Right. I just wanted singles. I wanted to
Sure.
have a certain good quality of life. Would I've liked to hit home runs? Yes. Okay. Um, but and that's my point being is that your idea of your business and the business you're in will determine if angel funding is for you or if it's not. So, angel
Exactly.
funding comes into play when you have a really, really big idea that is going to require a lot of money to get to it to be 30, 40, $100 million. I
To
mean,
grab market share,
yeah, well,
to grab, a very large portion of it,
yes, that's where.
or to create it.
Because an angel funder they don't get your money, just so everybody knows. An angel funder doesn't get his money when your company makes money. It doesn't get that as money. Your angel funder the investor gets his money when there is an action to sell the company, to merge it with other companies, to go public. That's when the angel fund.
Monetization event.
Yeah,
That's when they get it, which is a long time.
and they want a 10x value. They want to get 10 times the amount of money they put into it. And there's probably a certain time frame too.
Yeah, but
But
even so, this is what I don't think they really understand is that that's what they try to shoot for, but they want a better return, meaning they're not looking at markets that are just a 10x. They want markets that have a much higher multiple because then it ends up being a 10x. They're
yeah,
lucky to get one that has that 10x, and that's the way the math works out. But they're shooting for markets that they're a hell of a lot bigger. And so it's either all or none usually.
yeah. And so let me give you the opposite example, right? I have this really great company called Elite Funeral Funding where we buy life insurance policies when people pass away. We give them money in advance so that they have the money and they don't have to wait for insurance to pay. And it's a really great company. No angel funder is ever going to be interested in giving us money for that business because it's a very mature market. It's
Right.
a cash flow market. There's never going to be a big liquidity event. And there's going to be like, no, I don't really,
But hear me out. But at the same time, you can make an argument that it could be a private equity deal. It's something that certain family offices, because it's boring, because it doesn't have, let's say, this huge exponential annually growth that they can do, they'd be interested in that because it's not going to go away,
I
and because
agree.
there was a need. And
Yes.
so that's the type of stuff that's boring, but it actually makes the real money.
Yes, I agree with you. And what the example I was using is in regards to angel funders who are looking for the company to do a 10x or
Exactly.
larger like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean we're looking at those things too. It'll be exciting when it actually happens. It will. And so so the point being is most businesses, most of the owners who are listening to this, okay, you have what I never like this term, but it's called the quality of life business. Okay,
Or
you're
lifestyle.
yeah, you're going to what it means is that you're going to make some good money. You don't have to work for somebody else,
Yep.
right? You as you continue to work, your hours will go down, and you'll maybe potentially well, it's harder to sell that type of business too.
It is.
But it's just like the businesses I have all been quality of life businesses. They've made me. I've been, and I think the value. Listen, I think the number one most important thing that entrepreneurs need to know, and if you're not going to go for this big, huge watermelon, is you need to be increasing your net worth. That's the name of the game. I don't care what you're making at the company. Are you increasing your net worth? And if you're increasing your net worth, and that means is, are you spending like crazy on yourself? Are you buying Jaguars and Porsches and big houses and you have huge mortgages? Because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Every 10 years, there's a recession
Yep.
and you're going to get screwed.
And I have a partner that literally has a company that's what he does. He looks for that. So he looks for like plastic injection molding companies where they bought the house or the two houses. They have the
Wow.
nice cars and everything else. And then
Wow.
sure enough, recessions come. He buys them at an insane discount, just able to wait it out. And then 2 years later, he's back in the black. He literally
Wow.
just pounces on them.
What a great lead generator there.
Yeah.
What a great, I like that idea. That's smart. Um, we have time for one more last landmine.
Landmine.
Why don't you tell us one last big one that you think?
Litigation, by far, litigation. All right. Now, here's the thing: when anybody has litigation, the first thing typically that they do is they get sphincter flutter. It's a type of thing that they let it dominate their emotions. They let it dominate their mental state. They let it dominate their time. It becomes almost in a way like a tar baby or a black hole that is self-imposed that you can't get out of. Now, when you've been around and you've had a couple businesses and you've been down that road before, literally you look at it as like, okay, it's just another day. It's something that's going to work its way out. It's something that's not going to kill you. You just keep going, and you basically just fight in whatever way that you can. But litigation can typically be prevented many times by simply saying, I'm sorry, by simply going ahead and picking up the phone and eating a spoonful of shit. And that's the one thing that founders typically don't do. Go out there and do that uncomfortable thing and see if there's a path to go ahead and end the litigation, because it's a hell of a lot better and a hell of a lot less costly than what you're going to go through. Nobody comes out winning with litigation on either side of the fence.
I
But
completely agree.
there
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah. And I would say too, this is the other thing is my experience with very inexperienced entrepreneurs is they don't understand the court process
Yes.
too, right? And you don't realize how long it's going to take for the litigation. Therefore, it's super expensive.
Yes.
I saw cases after cases where somebody said, "Oh, fuck you, I'm just going to sue you."
Right.
Right? And they go to sue you and they're in it and they're in it and it's all emotions. And then
Yes.
it's 20, 30, $50,000 later. And then guess what happens at the end?
Little
Everybody
bit.
just goes back and negotiates a
Yeah.
term, right?
Exactly.
And so it's a big waste of time. I completely agree with you. I have some friends who have businesses and they're litigious in nature anyway.
Right.
And it's like, I'm like, why are you putting yourself? And by the way, when you go through that litigious scenario, um, you take a part of yourself away from your business.
And also, you take a part away from and I'm not going to say this in a tree huggery way, but from your soul. I mean,
Yes.
dealing with that stuff on a day-to-day basis, and really dragging you away from the thing that you love. If you love your business, which I do, and I love growing it. I love pushing it and seeing where I can take it. Dealing with that stuff is like doing taxes. It's even worse than taxes because there's that emotional element, and it's all negative emotion. So, the key is to get a mental callus very, very quickly, very quickly.
Yeah, I remember something I had a mentor for 25 years, 25 years. He said to me, I went in there, I was young when I started working with him. I was 26, and I go to him, I'd say, I have to get meaner because people in business, they're meaner and they screw people over, and I'm not that way. He said to me, he goes, Stephen, he goes, that's not really what happens in the
Right.
marketplace. He goes, just the opposite.
Yes.
He said, people they don't want problems. They want to be they I wouldn't say they want to, fair isn't the good word, but he says they just, it's a lot more kinder than you think it is.
It is.
And
I find it in my early days, based in New York and everything else, I viewed the same way. And I don't know if it was an immature thought of view, but, I was very cutthroat. And that's the way I viewed it. It was cutthroat. I didn't really feel for the people I was involved in. Now I do just the opposite. And it took me a while. It took me until I think having kids to really see it. But it's more about collaboration.
yeah,
It's more about people doing the right thing at the right time, not only for themselves, but for the business. And if you do it the right thing by your people, 99.999% of those problems go away. It's literally just doing the right thing, as simple as
maybe
that
yeah,
sounds.
maybe it has to do with the idea that, now we have money, and now it's not like the end all to end all. It's not like the biggest deal in our
Sure.
lives. We're taking, I don't know about you. I'm not taking these humongous risks where I can lose all my money. I just don't do
Right.
that anymore. So, maybe, plus, and I'm sure it was an experience back then as well. So, well, good. Listen, that's it was a great conversation. I know we can kind of go on and on about the landmines, but we kind of, broke it down to some really important things.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank so very much Chris Joyce from Gusher for coming on to today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. Please also give us a review if you really like today's podcast or any of the other ones, as long as it's 5 stars. And if you are looking for a line of credit for your business, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at fscreditline.com. That's FS as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com. Chris, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Sure. You can find me anywhere on the web, LinkedIn, etc. But you can definitely go to gusher.co, GUSHER.co, and I'm right there.
And Chris's last name is spelled Joyce as well. So Chris, thanks for being on today.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
So my takeaway from this today is you always have to be learning as an entrepreneur. And,
Absolutely.
and if you can find that guy with the snow on his roof, Chris, I have never been asked to be a mentor,
For
right?
real.
Yeah, never. Have you ever asked to be a mentor?
I've never been asked to be a mentor, but hear me out. I never had a mentor. All
Yeah.
right. And it's like, I know that is something that people search out for and do and everything else. I act as a mentor to 300 founders by de facto.
Yes.
But I've never been asked. But you said you had a mentor.
I had an amazing man. He was the
That's
smartest man I ever met. He introduced me to one of the businesses I have too. And let me tell you what he did for me. What was the biggest deal? It wasn't what he told me. It was the encouragement he gave me. He would come in and say, "Wow, you're doing really well." I'd be like, "I'm doing terrible." and,
right.
and he's like, "You just grew, like 300% last year." He always made me feel better. And I met with him every quarter for 20 years over lunch,
Sure.
and he was amazing.
That's
He was the
awesome.
smartest man I met. So,
You're very lucky. I'm sure you know this, to have someone of value like that in your life.
well, I did
For
seek
real.
it out. So to be honest, I did seek it out. So it
Good for you.
was, yeah, and I think it made a big difference in my career. So other
That's
than
awesome.
that, yeah, I want to wish everybody a great 2023. We're into January 2023. If you had a good year, you're happy. If you had a bad year, glad it's over. So see you later.